welcome to Framing the Foundation podcast. I'm your host, Sid Varulkar. I'm super excited today to welcome our next guest, Dr. Andrew Campbell. Dr. Campbell has a PhD in Pharmaceutical Sciences and was on the faculty of Indiana University of Medicine prior to joining the industry. Dr. Campbell currently is serving as a vice president and health program management at Aprinoia Therapeutics. He's also on the strategic advisory board for Procter& Gamble. A significant over 30 years of experience in the industry across product development, portfolio management, and overall clinical development. When Dr. Campbell is not busy grinding away in this industry, he enjoys adventure sport like fly fishing, motorcycle riding, mountain biking, and hiking. I'm super excited to have Dr. Campbell. Goes by Drew, and welcome to the podcast, Drew.
Hey, thanks, Sid. Happy New Year. It's good to see you.
Happy New Year to you as well. Well, thank you again so much for your time on, making, or I would say taking time to really be part of this podcast. This is exciting to have you on. And again, as I mentioned in your introduction, tons of experience being in the industry for almost 3 decades. It's really good to have you on the podcast. I'm sure the audience listening in would learn a lot from your experience. But to get started, take us through your journey. Like, how did you start off? To spending almost 3 decades in the industry now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. First off, thanks for the invite. It's great opportunity here to chat a little bit and give you a flavor of my journey, which isn't going to be everybody's journey. And let's absolutely share things that I did well, and I definitely haven't done everything well, and I'll share those things too, because there's definitely been some landmines that I've stepped on, and and
We all
those,
do that, don't we?
that's I think honestly I think that's one of the most important ways to learn. You've heard it a million times, but I actually believe that, and I believe that's important to allow others that same sort of freedom to sort of well, we messed that one up, but like that's okay. Let's keep moving here, So you have to assume good intentions, and so I think that's important. But thanks. It's my pleasure actually to have a chat with you on this. I think there's a lot to share, a lot to learn. All the way around, and I'm continually learning, and I think that's one of the I get probably one of the thematic elements of my journey is that I think I'm always trying to learn new stuff. So yeah, so I started off. I mean, I'll go way back. I did my undergraduate in biology, and back then anyway, wasn't a whole lot you could do with a bachelor's in biology. But I honestly, these are also things that happened too along the way. As I took a course from um, a really good physiologist. He was a physiology course, and he ended up teaching a pharmacology class, and I took pharmacology with him. This is as an undergraduate, and he gave just a great perspective because he was a physiologist. So he had just like, okay, this is what happens at the sort of the molecular level, but then the organismal level, and then what it means, beyond that, and even to the behavioral pieces. And so it really it was a spark because I wasn't clear. This was, I think, was my towards the end of my junior year. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going to go, what I was going to do next, and that kind of very quickly sealed the deal for me. And so I applied to a bunch of graduate schools and different programs, mostly out west in the western part of the U.S. I wanted to move from east to west and experience some of the big skies and all that stuff that's out there. And so I ended up going to the University of Colorado and enrolled in their Ph.D. program in pharmaceutical sciences. Obviously very broad, and I think that's another piece too that I think we can come back to is pharmaceutical sciences is there's a ton of stuff just in that,
Broad.
right? So yeah, and the program was really designed to sort of give people a flavor of lots of parts of that pharmaceutical, everything from pharmaceutics, compounding things, to the pharmacology side of things, toxicology, pharmacokinetics, all of those things that medicinal chemistry, all of that stuff that's sort of in
Right.
there. Got a fair amount of exposure to all that, and then you sort of pick pick a pathway and where you want to go, research you want to do to sort of do your dissertation. Anyway, I hit it off with somebody, and that's another theme that we can come back to as well.
Yeah,
Is
I was going to point it out, like how teachers can influence your dissertation, having the
That's exactly
right person.
right. I mean, there's those personality things that whatever you click, right,
Right.
and so to me those are doors opening, and if you don't step in, you'll never know, right? So
You have
so
to take
so
the
yeah,
risks sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, no question about it. You learn along the way, but you're right. I think that taking the risk is really really important, and you learn a lot about yourself. And having that confidence to be able to do it, I think, is a key piece because when you think big picture,
Right.
what are the for a lot of these things is does it really matter that much at big picture, right? So no, so like take your chances, learn what you can. Anyway, got in with just an awesome pharmacologist. He was just a great guy, super super smart, tons of amazing work that he had done, and a great teacher. And so he and I hit it off, and so I ended up doing pharmacology, and it was really specifically neuropharmacology. And that's what my dissertation was in, and so spent my time there. And then from there, it was back in the day. I'm a silverback, so I've been around a while. This is back in the day when academia really they put the blinders on you to sort of you got to go and do an academic position. So you start to think about writing R01 grants and all that fun stuff. But anyway, so I looked at a few things. I actually looked at some things in industry, but I ended up going and doing I was fortunate because it was better than a postdoc, quote unquote.
Right.
It was a
Yeah.
research faculty position, and so I did that, and I did some more work, more molecular work. Because at the time you needed molecular biology, so I jumped in and did that. But that was the same another back to the thematic things there opportunity came up. I was doing neurochemistry and I met a guy who was a molecular biologist who wanted to learn how to do like how do you make this matter and how do you learn about this. And they were the first to clone the mu opioid receptor, and they said,
Wow.
well, how do we like translate that into anything meaningful? And so he and I hit it off, and I ended up moving in and working in his lab and getting some of that molecular biology experience that you needed back then, and shared a lot of the pharmacology pieces, did a lot of characterization things along those lines. But after a few years of that, you definitely it's hard. It's a grind, no question about it. The same thing happened there. I got lucky, and I was actually working another job just to make ends meet because you don't make a ton of money in
Right.
academia.
Yeah.
And I had a young family, and so I was working another job, and I ran into a guy that worked at Eli Lilly there, and we started interacting and da da da. Long story short, jumped into industry, not with Lilly, but it sort of led to some other discussions, and jumped into industry and started off mainly in med affairs and sort of field medical affairs, um, and sort of a med affairs is one of those places I think that's really evolving within the industry.
Right.
It certainly has in the 30 years or so that I've been doing this, and great it's like anything, so much as like how the company views that function and what you want to do with it. And
Right.
so I spent really the first at least half of my career in medical affairs, and um, did some really 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 cool stuff, and that was mainly because of the companies, that's how they were structured. But then I've also done med affairs in tried it in other companies that didn't have the same sort of viewpoint of medical affairs, for lack of a better
Okay.
term, that med affairs was a function that could actually drive some neat science and do some really interesting work. And that's just a different approach. And I certainly prefer the one where you're trying to do some new stuff, some neat stuff, and challenge the science a little bit and that sort of thing. But I spent the first half of my career in medical affairs, and I think um, part of that, I think, I got involved in a lot of different things, and I quickly realized that you needed, even though I was in field medical, you really need to make your connections into the headquarters as a field person to sort of just
Go into
yeah, well, not only that, I mean, I think that's a positive spin-off of that, but it was really much more around getting internal folks to see how important it is to interact with the medical community out there, the thought leaders, as it were.
it.
Uh, there's a lot of really, really smart people out there, and when you have smart people talking to other smart people, some really cool ideas come up.
Good ideas come up, right?
But you can't always bring them to life. So that to me, I was like, I got to get inside and start, networking more internally, just so people can see what's possible. And so again, back to the sort of finding the mentor and the teacher and all that stuff. Same thing happened there, where I finally ran into somebody that got it, and he was my boss, and he said, "You got it, man. Like, just go. Like, you come into headquarters and start driving all this stuff." And so that's what I did, and had a great run there, and um, that's where I ran into just networking really made me realize that there's a lot more to do, and so I really wanted to learn a lot about the drug development process. Um, and so versus, taking things that are already on the market and sort of expanding their use, which is really what I had done for the first part of my career. It was like, okay, how do you like go back to the beginning and,
Right.
start the process and development. So same thing, just because I had networked and spent the time internally, met with the right people, asked the right questions, sort of had the right presence while you're internally. Opportunities came up. Somebody, the EVP of R&D, said, "I think you'd be great for this program lead role here. Why don't you go? Why don't you go try it out?"
Right.
Um, so that's how I ended up in the development space and getting involved there. And I think one of the key things there from sort of a leadership perspective as it relates to sort of program leadership, one of the things I think my first boss in that space told me, because I asked him, I said, "How do I fail?"
Right.
Because I said, "I don't know what I'm doing, how do I fail?" And so I need to know. And
Good
he
question.
said, yeah, he said, "Your job is to not be the expert in anything, even." He said, "You may have expertise in that area, but you have team members that are the true experts in that space. And don't try to show them that you're smarter than they are, or you know more than they are. They're the team members. You need to make sure that they can contribute." And that was, I think, really, really good advice, I think, in program leadership, because you're involved in sort of the soup to nuts stuff, and you can't know it all.
Right.
uh, I think drug development is one of the most complicated businesses there is, right? Things can go wrong in a
Yeah,
million different places. So
this is
yeah.
where I think, you bring up a good point there, Drew, because I've seen a lot of program managers, people that have worked in the past, um, try to drive decision making versus having the subject matter experts make that decision and then them driving it towards what does that mean for the overall company's
Yeah.
growth
Yeah.
or product pipeline and how you want to go. So yeah,
Yeah.
great point there.
I think that's exactly right. And I think it's an important piece there, to that. So the getting into that, I really liked that particular role. It does, to me, that role, I view it as um, sort of a jack of all trades, master of none,
That's what
and
none.
that's yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's an important piece, because everybody's coming into this role, however they get there, and we can certainly talk about that, um, with some background in something, some sort of expertise, whatever that may be. But that doesn't mean that they can't, broaden their horizons. They might have the right sort of people skill set in order to get in and be able to drive teams, and not necessarily be the expert in those particular areas. But you
It's
always
not
got.
like an sorry, it's not like an important trait to have is people management skills to be an effective program manager.
I think that's exactly right. So much of what happens in the program management space is really influence management. And so you don't in most roles in the industry, at least for this one, you don't typically have a lot of direct reports. Sometimes no direct reports
Right.
as a program lead, but you're leading a team. You have a team
Right.
of 10 or 12 people, and that team sort of flexes over time in terms of the membership of that team. But you have to be able to lead them. They have to believe in you. They have to trust you. They have to understand that you've got their back. But they also have to understand that you have certain roles and responsibilities and certain expectations to push to drive. And so I think that is something that you have to learn along the way. I think it's a valuable skill set to have, for sure. And like, I'm not necessarily the best at any of these things, but I've learned a lot over time. And you also have to learn about people. To your point, I think that's
Right.
a really, because some people are just give me the information and get out of my way, or get out of my office, whatever it is. And other people need to have more of a conversation. They need to sort of have some of the nuance and have further discussions. So I think it's an important skill set. I think is to have that sort of broad based understanding people management, expectation
Hmm.
management, but also understanding how to push when you need to push. So
Yeah, this
yeah.
might be a question for people trying to get into program management. As you said, your journey has been through from the lab to being med affairs to then getting an opportunity and also take those risks that are critical to really get into program management. But does having a PhD, which you have, help with better decision making or understanding the drug development process as a program manager?
I would say probably yes. But I don't think it's a have to have. I don't, because I've seen some great program leads that don't have that advanced degree, and because they have the people skills and they're smart and they understand this thing, or they may understand another facet of the industry that brings value to this. Because when you think about it, you're developing a product for a marketplace. So even people that are more on the commercial side, but really like the development side, I've seen them transition over into program leadership and be awesome at their roles. And that's really important, because you're creating a product for a marketplace. You need to be able to craft it and mold it, and make sure that
Right.
it's going to fit into the marketplace and add value to patients. And so there's a lot to that. There's a lot of nuance but it's very important. So
Yeah.
I think that the advanced degree definitely helps to sort of understand the scientific pieces, especially early on in development, when there's a lot of toxicology work that needs to happen. There's a lot of characterization of what your whatever it is, whether it's a small molecule or a biologic. All of those things that I think are really important to get to the IND stage and then move on. And I think that there is some value in understanding that. I do think it helped me. The program that I was in, like I said, was very diverse.
Mhm.
Got exposed to a lot of different things. Same again, back to the theme. Not necessarily an expert in all of those, but I knew enough about them. Pharmacokinetics, for example, I had taken enough pharmacokinetics courses to understand why it's important, why you need to know that, and why it's an important part of the drug development process. So I think having exposure to a lot of different things was definitely helpful. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, and being program management and leading that function, leadership is critical and
Hmm.
important. I think, and leadership goes both ways. Like you leading, you know, s- certain facets of development, and then you have the core leadership team on top of you. How do you like navigate through that process? And let's start by just understanding like what makes a good leader, and then dive into like what traits needed at when you get like heading a program management group, and then how do you see leadership you know, on top of you important? And what are the traits there where people succeed, fail, guidance? Would love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and this is where for sure I've not necessarily done all the best things because you're learning so much, and you're bringing something to it. So if you move to a new company, you're bringing what you have to this company, but that company has a culture, it has a way of doing things, it
Hmm.
has sort of a hierarchy that is sometimes it's very flat, but other times
Yeah.
it's not, and um, I I believe in sort of being very transparent about things, and sometimes you run into trouble that way. I've learned that I've hit some rocks, in my boat. I've hit some rocks just by being totally open and honest and transparent and giving my
Mhm.
opinion. And sometimes that doesn't always fly depending on the organization. Um, so I think but without getting into sort of the philosophy and the tenets of leadership, because there's more content out there than you'll ever be able to consume. Um, I have a way of doing things, and I've tried to work on bettering that.
Mhm.
But I do think that there's a the leadership that you bring to it is comes in the different forms, whether it's you're bringing poise and calm, because a lot of times I think that there's so much pressure on program teams, because if you've got a molecule that the whole company is hinging upon, and there's tons of pressure, and I've been in a couple of roles like that where the company's hiring a lot of people because they're expecting this drug to make it through, and
Succeed. Yeah.
they're taking the risk of building a commercial organization, et cetera, and you haven't necessarily gotten all the way through development. There is so much pressure on the program team and on the program lead. I think, by proxy, uh, the program lead really takes most of the heat. And I think that that's to me that was a key piece of the leadership that I think I do pretty well. But I also learned a lot was that I'm happy to take the lumps for the team. You
Hmm.
know, if there's a delay, if there's a mess up, a whatever, somebody is going to be breathing down your neck and wondering like what's going on, and you're the one who's going to be on point. And
Right.
so I am a firm believer of taking that for the team. Like, don't go to the
Yeah,
team. I'll take it. It's fine. You know
yeah,
what?
that's a great trait because I think many times I've seen program managers passing that heat on to the rest of the
Yeah,
team, saying you guys
yeah,
are not doing, and I'm getting like all these questions from CEOs and CMOs as to why
right. I think
things
that's
are
a
not progressing. So I think it's a great trait. So anybody who's listening into this, I think you want to move into a program manager, you have to be calm, composed, poised. And again, it depends on individual personalities. And Drew, having known you for so long, I think you're excellent at it. Stay calm, but at the same time, ensuring that the message is delivered. So
it,
that's pretty cool.
it, yeah. Thanks. I just I view that as a very important part, because you're going to be under the heat. It's okay to take most of that, because the team because everybody behaves differently, and it's very hard to manage all of the different players on the team, because another component of this, kind of back to your bigger question about the leadership and sort of the success factors, etc. Most of the organizations that have these program program centric views of drug development, um, most of the people on your team, in most cases all of the people on your team, report to different functions.
Right.
And so there's that's another facet of this that's adds complexity for sure, because those functions have their own way of doing things, their own leadership style, their own pressures that they're getting from their leadership, etc. So So a key component, I think, of this role is just the continual networking that you have to do within an organization, and that's not only with your team, making sure that, but it's within the functional leadership for each of those teams. So whether it's in the clinical development space or if it's in the toxicology space, you also have to be working with the leaderships. In some cases, they're C-suite folks, and in other cases, they're not. They may be vice president or senior vice presidents, but they have a lot of responsibility themselves, and they have their own pressures. So
Mhm.
it helps constantly to be having those discussions with those people, doing the networking, talking about what are the things in the way, like how can we work together to make sure that we're sort of knocking down the barriers. That's a really key component, and I think that's um, that's it becomes very challenging, and sort of back to learning opportunities. I think is really understanding those dynamics and being able to navigate them. Again, I haven't always done them well, but I've always learned. I think people realize if you're trying to learn and you're trying to do the right thing, you're given a little bit of slack on things, um, but but not always. And so you're constantly learning about how you best manage within the organization. So back to the influence management piece, I think that that's a key skill set that you sort of have to constantly be honing. I think it's an important piece. So and I've, like I said, I've learned a lot. Didn't always do it the right way, but I've learned my lessons, taken my lumps, and being able to sort of um, get back up. You've heard that same
Right.
thing there, right? You're in,
Yeah.
sometimes you get beat up. I've gotten beaten up before. Actually, some of them were just sort of eye-opening interactions that I've had with C-suite folks, CEOs, where they're literally screaming at you. so, so,
Yeah.
um, and you have to have thick skin. You have to understand that they are under incredible pressure, especially if it's a public company. Like, they have to meet the demands of the shareholders and the boards and all of that stuff. So the pressure is there, and I would say oftentimes a program lead is sort of the pressure release. Like, it's everybody sort of goes there to do pressure. So I think that's an important part of the role, is to go, okay, I'm taking the pressure, but I'm also going to relieve some of the pressure, and to for the team. And so you're kind of doing a little bit of both, and it's challenging at times. There's no question about it. And you sort of, sometimes you go to bed frustrated, sometimes you go to bed high because it's an awesome day. You've had all of those things. They
Yeah.
happen, and they can happen in 24 hours. They can be really amazing to, oh my goodness, this is not working. And so I
That's
think
great.
that's it. So a lot of companies said have, and this, how they set the program leadership
Function.
role
Yeah. Yeah.
within the organization is absolutely essential to its success, because I've seen it such that
Definitely.
um,
Yeah. Different organizations have it very differently set up. They call it different terms, and yeah.
absolutely, and sort of what the expectations are for the role. And sometimes you don't learn that. This is, I'm a fisherman, and I always have the mantra of, you don't know till you go, because people say, is the fishing good? And they go, I don't know. I'm sitting on my couch. I won't know
Right.
till I go. Right.
Go
and
there.
and
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Um, with that, when you switch jobs, you go to a different company, etc. The interview, everything
Yeah.
seems great at all,
Grass is
but
greener
when
on
you
the
get
other side. Yeah.
there, until you get there and you immerse yourself in the culture and the ways of working and the pressures and all of that, the hierarchical pieces there, you really don't know. And so I've been at organizations that have set it up really well for success, and I've been at organizations that haven't. And so, you a lot of times you struggle if the organization you're swimming upstream, I think, in a lot of cases because the organization has not put the right emphasis on what that program leadership role is and how
Yeah,
important it is
it
or it
is.
isn't,
Or
depending on.
what you can offer too. Like, sometimes they just are completely naive as to the importance, which is where my next question is going to be. Like, do you think more and more startup companies should integrate the program management role very early? Because I've seen a lot of startup companies just have a CMO and then there's a CronOps team driving it.
Yeah,
And then all these different functions are reporting into the CMO navigating it. So things are
right.
all over the place versus being much more controlled. Well, I'd love to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, yeah. So, great question, again, some of this comes down to what's the mission for the company, what's the goals for the company, and some of the companies, their goal is to, I just want to get it to a certain stage and sell it off. I want to sell off the asset, or assets, and nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a well worn model that has worked in a lot of ways within the industry. Um, but I think it's really important to understand, like, what is it that is the corporate strategy. I think that's, to me, is so pivotal for so
It's
many
always a
different
struggle, right,
companies.
with startup companies.
And I think that's right. I think you're right because people view strategy a lot of different ways. Same thing with leadership. It's like, there's a million books and all sorts of content on strategy. I try to keep everything in my life simple. Not always successfully, but you try to keep things simple. And for me, strategy is the decisions you make, the choices you make. That's what defines your strategy. And so, but you have to have an overarching, mission for what you're trying to do. And I think that that's a key piece. So I think organizations, when they're crystal clear on that part,
Mhm.
I think, to your point, is I think they probably will understand that they actually need a program, sort of leadership function, because especially smaller companies, because so many of the other players are involved in a lot of other different things. To your point, things are all over the place. You
It's all
need
over the
you need
place.
some, you
Yeah,
need to have some place to go to get like regular updates on where things are, what's the progress, how is this looking, what are the timelines look like, how much money is it going to cost us, and very importantly, I think, is the constantly thinking about how can you do it better, not necessarily faster. Um, and I'll come back to the faster piece because I think that's another lesson, certainly, that I've
right.
learned over time. But how can you do it better? Have we spent enough time thinking about other alternative ways to do this, and whether what
That's a good point because most of the companies don't. They just follow the rat race. Just let's get to the market. Let's get to the market. But
they just
is there
drive?
anything we can do better?
I think that's exactly right, and I think a lot of companies, again, back to the pressure, and this is not a pejorative on any one company or any other companies. Just, there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of pressure to move at a fast pace. But I think you sacrifice sometimes, like, other possibilities. And I've seen it play out where you went fast, fast, fast. You had a little bit of time to think about stuff. You had a couple ideas, but you didn't necessarily have the time to have them take hold. You had a few discussions, but never enough. And it comes back around, right? You all of a sudden you hit a very significant hurdle, or a hiccup, in your development path, and it comes back around to, well, we talked
Right.
about that about 18 months ago. Remember, we talked about that, but we decided we weren't going to do it, or we weren't going to spend any more time on it. And I think that's a key component. I think is giving teams enough time to think about it. Not too much, because we all know we could sit there and talk about this for forever, but to be able to say, go back and come up with come up some other ways to approach this, and teams actually really respond to that. They
Hmm.
love that. Whether it's have we looked at all of the other possible regulatory pathways that we could be considering, or precedent that's out there, even in different therapeutic areas, or different, whether it's a biologic or not. is there precedent that we could be considering and thinking
Right.
about? And so a lot of times you just don't have the time to really digest to the extent that I think it could. Again, we don't live in a utopian, society here, a utopian space. There's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to meet expectations. So it's a hard thing to balance. But I do think that that's one thing. If I had my way to do it, I would, for sure you got to meet all the expectations, but you also have to manage the expectations, and
Right.
you
Yeah.
also have to give your team. If you're hiring, if you think you're hiring good people, in a lot of cases the best people, then give them the space to
That's
actually think
true.
about
Yeah.
alternatives and different ways to do it. And some of them are risky, but you have to just be able to do it. And teams love that. Teams rally around that kind
Right.
of a thing as an opportunity to go, here's how I think we should do this, or here's a portfolio of, we've got a whole bunch of backups, but here's how I think we should be considering how they fit into the overall
Right.
portfolio development of the company. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that's
And
a long-winded answer to your question, but I
no, no,
do
that's
think
good. That's great.
people do it differently. They have different models. They have
Hmm.
different, the way they view the program leadership function
Yeah.
is different, and I think empowering that function also varies a lot. And so, like I said, I've
Yeah.
been in
It's a
places
good
where
point.
it's a challenge because you're
Yeah.
swimming upstream all the time, because the
Right.
power lies in the functions, in the individual functions.
Right.
It doesn't lie in the program, leadership function. So I've seen that as well, and that's hard. It's hard place
No,
to.
it's hard. And that's a good point. But so startup companies having a program management group very early, um, do you think is a value add, because then you're focusing on the right questions about, we're developing this drug, but what's the market size? I mean, is that even make sense to develop them? Because I've seen a lot of oncology drugs get into phase 1 proof of concept with a certain solid tumors, or basket studies where they club everything in, and then if they see a signal somewhere, they try to develop that. But then understanding there's enough, even a good market out there for
Right.
this, understanding that upfront does help. And that's where I think the program management team comes up with probing these questions,
Yeah.
which sometimes CEOs tend to ignore, or they get to it very late in the game.
So great. So it's a great point. Sid's. So yeah, I think many of us have sort of been in those situations too. I think a lot of that comes back to what is the corporate strategy.
Strategy,
What is
yeah,
it that you're trying to do? Um, but you're absolutely right, and that was one of the first sort of eye-opening things for me when I first got into this space. Being a basic scientist, I kind of understood the discovery, into IND, early developments pieces. But to understand that, first off, you're on a trajectory here, right? There's a timeline that is a trajectory for this asset that you're trying to develop. But you have to be always thinking about, where's it going? Like,
right,
what space is this going to occupy in the market? And is there a space there? And if there, doesn't mean you say, if there's no space for it, it doesn't mean you go, okay, we're done. It means, okay, can we create a space for it? And
right.
how do we
That's
think
a different
about
strategy altogether, right?
yeah. And so it totally influences your whole development pathway in terms of where you're going. If you're developing a Me Too drug, okay, that's probably pretty clear. You might be able to have some nuance here and there. But if you're developing something new, um, and you don't really understand what that potential marketplace is like, I think it's absolutely essential that you learn as much as you can about what that marketplace is like, so that you can actually enter that marketplace in a powerful position, in a
Right.
position where you can actually get leverage early, hopefully early, but sometimes not. Sometimes you go, okay, we're going to do this first, but we got a quick follow-on indication because we know that's going to be bigger, but we want to get to the market first. And of course, that's another approach you can take. But you have to understand what the marketplace is like, what the market dynamics are like, what the payers are going to be looking at, and what kind of data do you need to
Mm-hmm.
develop in order to have a label that is favorable. And That's you got to do that years and years and years in advance.
Yeah, it's a process, right, over a couple of years.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just like with the recent trends in what 2023 was all about, with lack of funding, a lot of biotech companies
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah.
Um, the way I look at this, like industry, there's some areas, there's lots of mergers that have occurred, which is great for certain companies. Some companies have generated or got an IPO just before the crisis hit, so they are like now moving in a direction where they might be running out of cash, trying to generate more. But what are your overall thoughts about where we're headed and what 2024 might look like?
Yeah, well, my crystal ball. Let me
Get your
see.
magic wand out.
Let me shake my crystal ball up here, and it's snowing in my crystal ball. Yeah, so I think that there are thousands of people way smarter than I am that are sort of thinking about this and trying to navigate this piece of it. I'll go all the way back and say in the time that I've been in the industry,
Yeah, I was going to say that probably seen this before.
I've
After
seen
years at least,
the
the
ups and the
curve.
downs, and
Yeah,
anybody that's been in the industry for I would say for more than 15 or so years has seen things come and go and up and down, and I think that that's fairly common. This industry is I think notorious for expansion and contraction in terms of employees. Just take headcount for an
right,
example. Right now, lots of companies are letting people go um, for lots of different reasons, I think. But all in all, it's adding to, sort of the perception, right? And companies like, oh, wow, the marketplace isn't there, or, the investors aren't there,
right, right,
or, government's making it really hard for reimbursement, all of those particular factors that come into play. And so companies right now are going, hang on a second here. I think we have too many people because we need to conserve our resources. And so you see a lot of companies letting people go. Obviously, sometimes that happens because there's a data readout, right? Good
yeah,
good good friend
unfavorable,
of
yeah,
mine,
yeah,
just the company just had a readout and they let 95% of their people go, and that's just how it. That's the risk that you take in this industry, especially in a small company. The advantages are that you just have this incredible team that everybody is sort of contributing and rolling up their sleeves and doing a lot of different things, and you're taking that risk on. And if that's, especially if it's a new science, new technology that they're trying to develop, it's a lot of risk, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, the drug development process is, I don't know, what is it, about 8% from when you get to an IND that you might actually make the market. That's not a
pretty
that's
steep,
not a
yeah,
great.
absolutely,
It's a lot of risk that is being assumed, and I think that's a lot of what we do every single day is just manage the risk, mitigate the risk
yeah.
as best you can. And so I have seen ups and downs over the course of my career for sure. um,
So
and
we'll
I think
bounce back is what your thought process is. Yeah,
I actually think that's true. I think what happens is, so yes, I mean, if I were a soothsayer, I would say it will bounce back, but it's probably going to look a little bit different. I think there's
different.
other dynamics, that are much larger than some of the things that have
Yeah,
happened in the
that's
past.
where I'm going to throw you a curveball with the AI technology coming
Yeah,
in. How do you
I think that.
think you're going to see the industry evolve? Any thoughts there?
So I think that's one of the things I think that's driving a lot of what's going on. I think it's probably an uncertainty around how best to leverage it, but it's also people are saying, well, my IBM Watson can do this really really well. What do we need 30 people for?
Right. Yeah.
So you're having those kinds of discussions, I'm sure, that are going on, at certain levels as well. But I do think that um, I do think the market will come back around. I do, but it'll probably look a little bit
A little
different.
different. Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think it's is also an important thing to be considering, is that it creates new opportunities for people. So I actually know, and I know you and I have chatted about this too. I know you know folks as well that have gotten laid off in the last year, and it's taken them a while to find a job. But to me, and that's unfortunate because that can be a hardship for sure on them and their families. But it also, I think, forces people to be thinking a little bit differently about how they leverage their skill sets.
Right. Yeah. How
How
else
else
can be?
can I do something that can add some value to the industry, to a company, et cetera. So it does create opportunity too. It's a challenge. I think it's an uphill battle, but the people I think that bounce back the best are the ones that go, hey, you know what? This is just I'm just brushing stuff off, you
Yeah.
know.
Brush it off. Move on.
Yep. I'm going to take a week or two to get my headspace, you know, because it is that's
Traumatic as well, right? Yeah.
if you haven't ever been laid off, it's the first time that happens to you, and you haven't been in the industry long enough and seeing the ups and downs. It's happened to me. Um, it's a real shot in the gut. I mean, it's a real challenge. It hurts. So the first time that happens, you know, is you can be you can stagger a little bit, I think. But I think you have to then go, wait a minute, I have things I can offer. You got to sort of pick up the pieces again, start the
Right.
networking, start thinking about how you can leverage your skill sets differently. And that might be looking at different jobs within the industry, or even outside the industry, but have an influence on the industry, an impact on the industry, doing some consulting work, doing some sort of behind the scenes things that everybody needs. And I do think that that's an opportunity now with the industry the way it is. I do think that um, companies are cutting a lot of people, but they still need the work done.
Yeah. It's true.
So to
Yeah.
me, I think that creates opportunity for people to go, well, yeah, listen, I can do that. I know you don't have the head count to hire me full time, but you know, whatever, I can do this as a part time gig and get into and doing some consulting stuff. And I've worked with some amazing consultants that just have done, you know, they're just great. And
Right.
once they realize that and they can add value there and they still feel challenged and feel like they're part of something, like it's a boom, like you sort of recreated yourself. And
Correct.
I've seen a lot of those people like branch off and go into consulting full time and then come back into the industry full time, you know? So,
Yeah, that brings me to my final question is like success mantras. Yeah, Drew, do you have any success mantras that you want to share?
yeah. So I think, yeah, so a couple things. I think one is patience. And I'm not, my wife will tell you this. I'm not necessarily the best at that, but I've gotten better. I think that there's one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older is like, you know, sometimes you have to ride things out a little bit and be a little bit more patient. It doesn't mean that you just do nothing. It just means you have to understand you're going to take some the company's going to take some hits or there's going to be challenges there. And if you're able to ride it out, I think that's an important thing. And at some point, you have to make a decision: like, do I stay? Do I go? Whatever that
Mhm.
is, or do I start looking at other opportunities? So I think patience is one key piece. And I think uh, I give this analogy to friends that don't like know the industry, and this I describe it this way, and whatever. I said, you know me well enough. I come up with some interesting phrases and all sorts of things, right? But you know, this just came to me once when people like, yeah, well, what does it do for work? Well, it's really hard to explain, frankly, right? Because if you say, well, you know, I'm in pharmaceutical or biotech, you know, drug development, almost everybody immediately goes, why do drugs cost so much,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
This is the
Yeah, you're a
backyard
big off.
barbecue.
You're a big off
Yeah,
people.
right. This is the
Your
backyard
industry.
barbecue, right? With people that just don't understand it, and it's an absolutely fair question. so, but to explain it would take 10 years, so I
Yeah,
don't have enough
sure.
time.
Yeah.
So I tell people that like here's what I do every day, and I think this it's a very simplistic thing. Well, So back to your question on the mantra. The other mantra that I have is I tell people this all the time: watch more Sesame Street. And you know what? It sounds really silly for an adult to be saying that, but it's actually true because they teach you all the same things. You know, it's like everything I need to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And there's actually some real truth in that because you're working with people all the time. In our case, it's challenging because almost everybody is really, really smart. In my case, almost everybody's way smarter than I am. And so you're working, but you're still working with people.
Right.
And it's really, really important to understand that. So I think that's one mantra is like, yeah, watch more Sesame Street. But I think, but part of that is like, people say, well, what is your job? I go, here's how I describe my job. I go to work and it's a sandbox. It's a big sandbox. And your job is to go and build a beautiful sandcastle. And so, okay, that's my job. I'm going to go start building a sandcastle. But you have other people that are there and, you have some tools to work with. You have a shovel or you have, a mold or whatever to build your sandcastle. But you have some things. So you go and you to start building your sandcastle. And some people are right there with you 100% behind you and they're helping you along the way, right? They're either co-leading it with you or they're like, yeah, tell me what I
Right.
need to do, and they're helping you build your sandcastle, and they're handing you tools that you need at the right time to help you build your sandcastle. There's other people that are in that same sandbox that are standing by and waiting till your sandcastle gets to a certain point, and then what do? They kick it. And
So
but
it's a
you have to be
very
able.
good way to like put it. Yeah, yeah,
They crush your sandcastle, right? Like there's always the bullies, the whatevers, the
yeah.
people
Or
that
they start in the corner and say it's still gonna get built.
the people that are playing games or whatever it is. I've seen it, sort of play out that way. So, and then so you have to say, okay, that's what I do every day. Some people are helping out build my sandcastle. Some people aren't. Every now and then, a cat comes along and does his business in your sandbox,
Yeah,
right? And you have to clean that up. So, like, it's the same sort of thing in many different industries. Is understand we're working towards a common goal, and not everybody is always pulling in the exact same direction
think the same way.
and trying to help you build your sandcastle. So I
Very
think that
fun.
that's
Yeah,
yeah, it's a silly analogy, but honestly, I think that's what it is. It's just obviously infinitely more complicated than building a sandcastle
yeah.
to
It's like the
build.
simplest way to describe how most companies operate, and
Yeah,
how most people operate within a company. Yeah, yeah. Some
yeah,
help building, some not very happy with the way things are going. You want to criticize, yeah, but not help. So I think that's a tough scenario to deal with. But
yeah. No, I think it's right. I think it's a simple way to view it, but it's a very challenging piece. But there's so many rewards. I think at the end of it, for me, the almost uh, yeah, I'd say almost to everything that I've been a part of, etc. It's always been the people that you remember, the
right,
people that you form bonds with, and in some cases that's patience, right? I mean,
true,
if you're close enough to a rare disease drug, you can be pretty close to patients in development, and honestly, the impact there is tremendous on motivation and how do we find a cure, how do we really help this. And so but it's always, to me, it always sort of comes back to that's the thing that I remember. Yeah, I've developed this and done that, and been part of these pieces. And I say a part because no one does anything by themselves in this
right. So
industry.
yeah,
It's always a team effort, but it's always the team and the people that you worked with that I take with me. I think that's the most important piece. And I've learned so much. Like I said, there's so many people that are so smart in this space, that are so
right.
intelligent, um, and you can learn a ton. But I think to me, you asked earlier the question about leadership, and having been in the industry as long as I have and seen ups and downs and seen some good and seen some not so good and all of that piece. I think leadership. and depending on how you're looking at it. But I think
Hmm.
senior leadership, especially within a company, is absolutely everything. It's everything.
They
It
set the
makes up.
tone.
It's set the tone. It's create the environment, the ecosystem for the people to do the work. It's to make the hard decisions,
Hmm.
because I we've all
At the right
seen that.
time.
Yeah, at the right time. We've seen that happen many times. I think,
Right.
if you've been in the industry long enough, you see people like, man, you should have made that decision 6 months ago. The ship has sailed. Like, it's
Right.
not, you're not going to
Yeah,
have the same impact now, right? And that can be, probably a lot of companies are doing that now with letting people go. That's a
that's true.
really hard decision for organizations to make. Um, but they have to be made. It's part of it. So, and that can that's just one example, but there are so many of, like, we need to make some decisions here. We need to move some money from A to B in order to get some information so that we can make that decision. Like,
Yeah,
all of those sorts of things, I think, are really important, and that comes down to leadership and the people at the top having, not only having the foresight, but also having really good listening skills to what's going on,
that's
and
important. Yeah,
what their team is telling them, what the environment is telling them, and then being able to sort of synthesize all that stuff to make decisions and make the impact. And that's not always easy. I absolutely understand all that, but I think to me, leadership is everything. I've seen it absolutely destroy companies, and I've seen it make companies actually, blossom. And
great.
it's a make or break. It really is.
This is great. Drew, again, I think it's 55 minutes. It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
For listeners, if you want to connect and engage in conversations with Drew, check him out on his LinkedIn page. I'll put a link in the description. But thank you again for your
yeah,
time, Drew. It's been fantastic, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime later
yeah.
in the year.
Cool. Thank you, Sid. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It was really fun sort of thought exercise for me to sort of, like, because you have to step back and go, okay, like, how did I get here?
How did I get it? Yeah, I know. We sometimes don't take a pause and think about how we made the journey. Right? We
Yeah,
just
that's exactly
keep
right.
living it every day, keep moving forward.
Absolutely, but back to my point, I appreciate it, and frankly, it's people like you that kind of keep me moving, keep me going in the
No, I
industry. Just
appreciate that. Thank you.
you forge relationships with people that are way better at things than you are, and but also, you forge friendships that you just never even would have thought of, that you would have had with people over time, and to me, that's the value. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And for, just for listeners, Drew and me ride motorcycles together. So if you want to join a group, just feel free to pick us
That's right.
up.
Well, Sid, we're gonna get you your new GS 1300
GS
one of these
1300.
days.
Yeah, working on it.
It's a beautiful
Great.
bike.